So far we've talked about tectonic plates and the fact they're moving around over periods of millions of years. But what actually happens at the places where they touch, the plate boundaries? We'll start off by talking about the three types of boundary: transform, divergent and convergent. And also there's three different types of convergent boundaries, and those are oceanic continental, oceanic oceanic, and continental continental convergent boundaries. In some cases this will lead us into talking about what's happening just under the plates as well. And then finally we'll talk about the mapping symbols we use to show on a map what is actually happening at the boundaries. First we'll start talking about divergent plate boundaries. At divergent plate boundaries, two or more plates are moving apart and new crust is being created. Oceans are born and grow wider where plates diverge or pull apart, as seen in the video. In the oceans, this has produced the mid-ocean ridge system, which can also be described as a global range of underwater mountains. Well-known ocean ridges include the Mid-Atlantic Ridge, the East Pacific Rise, the Juan de Fuca Ridge, and the Galapagos Rise. Let's look more closely at a couple of examples. The Mid-Atlantic Ridge, as seen in the video, occurs because the North American and Eurasian plates are moving away from each other. The ridge extends into the South Atlantic Ocean between South America and African plates. The ocean ridge rises to between 2 to 3 kilometers above the ocean floor and has a rift valley at its crest, marking the location at which the two plates are moving apart. There's also a triple junction in the Red Sea East Africa region. The Afar region in northern Ethiopia is the center of a Y-shaped rift system where the continental lithosphere is being stretched and is splitting, as seen in this video. The Arabian plate is rifting away from the African plate along an active divergent ridge system to form the Red Sea and the Gulf of Aden. The rifting then extends southwards where the African plate is itself becoming stretched along the line of the East African Rift Valley and is splitting to form two new plates, the Nubian and Somalian plates. The point in the Afar region where the boundaries of all three plates meet is called a triple junction. In time, as the Nubian and Somalian plates move further away from each other, the area between them will grow thinner and drop below sea level. New ocean lithosphere may form along the centre of the rift, producing a new narrow ocean basin with its own mid-ocean ridge. Within continents, divergent boundaries produce rift valleys such as the Red Sea and East African rifts that we just spoke about, and the lesser-known West Antarctic Rift. As we saw in the video of East Africa, and also in this image of Iceland, when a diverging boundary occurs on a land, a rift or separation will arise, and over time that mass of land will break apart into distinct land masses, and the surrounding water will fill the space between them. Iceland offers scientists a natural laboratory for studying, on land, the processes that occur along submerged parts of a divergent boundary. Iceland is splitting along the Mid-Atlantic Ridge. As North America moves west and Eurasia east, new crust is created on both sides of the diverging boundary. While the creation of new crust adds mass to Iceland on both sides of the boundary, it also creates a rift along the boundary. Iceland will inevitably break apart into two separate land masses at some point in the future, as the Atlantic waters eventually rush in to fill the widening and deepening space between. Here you can see the beginning of that split in a national park in Iceland. One image shows you above ground, and the other shows you what you'll see underwater. Now we'll move on to talking about transform faults. Most transform faults are found on the ocean floor. They commonly offset active spreading ridges, producing zigzag plate margins, and are generally defined by shallow earthquakes. A few, however, occur on land. The San Andreas Fault Zone in California is a transform fault that connects the East Pacific Rise, a divergent boundary to the south, with the San Gorda Juan de Fuca Explorer Ridge, another divergent boundary to the north. Watch the following video from the Discovery Channel about the San Andreas Fault to learn more.
These giant gashes in the Earth are reminders of our planet's awesome power. They are fault lines, fractures in the Earth's crust where huge slabs of rock slowly grind past each other. Most faults we can't see, But here in California, the San Andreas Fault is visible at the surface.
You can't have an earthquake without a fault. And I'm standing right now on what is perhaps the most famous fault in the world, the San Andreas Fault, that extends from Mexico down south, way up to Oregon in the north. This is one of the few places in the world where you can stand with 1 foot on one tectonic plate and one on another. In other words, this ground here is attached to New York and Iceland. The ground here is attached to Hawaii and Japan.
The San Andreas Fault sits on the boundary between the North American and Pacific plates. It's called a strike slip fault, a place where two plates collide and try to slip past each other. As these plates move or creep in different directions, sometimes they get stuck. The longer they stay stuck, the more tension builds and the bigger the eventual quake. In other places, the plates move smoothly past each other. These areas buckle as the Earth shifts. The changes are subtle. Roger Bilham keeps track of these changes with his creep meter, a device that measures movement along the fault. A computer collects data every minute for a year. This jump in the graph tells him the Earth shifted about 5 millimeters in a couple of hours. A small shift like this can have huge consequences for us.
That might not seem much, 5 millimeters, but it's affecting a long section of the fault, maybe 5 miles long, involving millions of tons of rock. Now, it really doesn't matter here. This is a nice sort of field that aren't any people, but further north, this creep process and the things that are happening beneath the Earth are far more sinister.
The San Andreas Fault and its branches trigger more than 10,000 quakes a year. Sometimes the results are devastating. Just ask the people of Los Angeles or San Francisco. Over the last 2 decades, major quakes rocked both of these cities. Life goes on, but the risk remains. In an area this active, the next violent tremor could happen at any time.
Now we'll start talking about convergent boundaries. The Earth's size has remained relatively the same since shortly after its formation of 4.6 billion years ago. This means that the Earth's crust must be destroyed at the same rate it is being created. The destruction or recycling of the Earth's crust takes place at convergent boundaries. Convergent boundaries are the zones where two tectonic plates move towards each other, come together at their plate boundaries. At convergent boundaries, tectonic plates collide and crust is destroyed as one plate is pulled beneath the other. The type of collision depends on the types of plates involved. These are oceanic-continental, oceanic-oceanic, and continental-continental. We'll start with oceanic-continental plate convergence. When an oceanic plate collides with a continental plate, the crust forming the oceanic plate gets bent and pulled under the continental crust. This is because the rocks that form the oceanic crust are denser and thinner than the rocks that form the continental crust. The process by which the oceanic crust is pulled under the continental crust is called subduction, and the zone at which this occurs at the plate boundaries is called the subduction zone. At the subduction zone, where the oceanic crust sinks beneath the continental crust, a deep oceanic trench or valley is created. These can be many thousands of kilometers long and 8 to 10 kilometers deep, making them the deepest part of the ocean floor. Oceanic and continental plate collisions result in mountain and volcano formation. Mountains are formed as the overriding continental plate gets lifted up over the oceanic plate. An example of this is found at the boundary between the South American continental plate and the Nazca oceanic plate. The South American continental plate is being lifted over the subducted Nazca oceanic plate, creating the Andes mountain range. The formation of volcanoes is a result of the subduction of the oceanic crust. As the oceanic crust gets forced deeper into the Earth, the increasing heat and pressure releases trapped water and gases, the combining effect of which is the crust melting to form magma. This magma then rises and accumulates in magma chambers, which then feeds and creates volcanoes on the overriding continental plate. Earthquakes are also common at oceanic and continental plate boundaries. These occur when the deepest part of the subducting oceanic plate breaks into smaller pieces. Some of the pieces become locked in place for long periods, and when they are suddenly released, they generate large earthquakes. Next we'll talk about oceanic-oceanic plate convergence. This is very similar to oceanic-continental convergence in that one of the plates is subducted under the other during the collision. At the subduction zone, a very deep trench is formed in the ocean floor. Oceanic and oceanic plate convergence results in the formation of volcano chains. The crust that is pulled under or subducted melts to form magma. This magma rises to the top of the overriding oceanic plates and erupts on the ocean floor. Over millions of years, the lava and debris from the volcanic eruptions pile up on the ocean floor until the volcano rises above sea level to form a volcanic island. These types of islands are usually formed as chains called island arcs, which run parallel to the trench at the subduction zone. Oceanic-oceanic plate convergence experience similar powerful earthquakes to oceanic continental convergences. So now we'll move on to what happens when two continental plates converge. When two continental plates collide, they resist downwards motion or subduction because the continental rocks that make them up have similar density. Instead, the crust tends to buckle and get pushed upwards and sideways. Thus, when two continental plates collide, mountains are formed. Approximately 200 million years ago, when Pangaea broke apart, the Indian plate began its journey northwards. About 50 million years ago, the Indian plate collided with the Eurasian plate. This collision caused the crust to buckle upwards and the Eurasian plate to crumple up over the Indian plate. Over millions of years, the continuous collisions between the two plates has resulted in the formation of the Himalayan mountain range and the Tibetan plateau. The Himalayas are the highest continental mountains in the world, holding many peaks at 8,000 meters and above, the highest being Mount Everest at 8,848 meters. Since the Indian plate is continuing its northward movement into the Eurasian plate, the Himalayas continue to grow at a rate of about 5 to 20 millimeters a year. So now we'll finish off by talking about mapping. Here's a map of the world showing the different plates in different colours. You can see that many of the plates contain both ocean and land. However, looking only at this map, it's hard to tell exactly what is going on at each of the plate boundaries. In fact, it gives no indication at all as to what is happening. So here's a similar map from the provincial exam data pages, which you can find in the exam topic near the bottom of the course. This map contains all the symbols at all the plate boundaries to show you what is happening at each of those boundaries. The arrows show you the direction the plates are moving in at that particular boundary, and the barbs on the convergent boundary lines are on the side of the overriding plate, which means the other plate is being subducted. Make sure you study this map from the exam data pages and understand what it is telling you. There's also a second map of the San Andreas Fault in the data pages that shows more detail in this area, and it shows you what's happening not just in California, but also off the coast of BC.